Good morning and welcome to the latest instalment of my build of the DJH A8 kit. We've completed the chassis and we've fitted the motor and we've fitted the pickups. The wheels are a little bit tarnished, but I'll clean those up as and when. Don't really need it at the moment, but what we're going to do today is we're going to start building the body, which is page 6 of the instructions, and it basically is the commencement of the footplate. Now it's a little bit unusual, this footplate, because as I mentioned in the first video, it consists of two parts. So this is the underside, which has got the buffer beams on and the valances on the side, and then a part sits on top of that, which provides the overlap on the footplate. Now, I had a look at this before I started, and I've come to a little bit of a problem. Now, there are two things that you could possibly do if this situation arises if you buy this kit. If you notice very carefully, there's a tab just by my finger. Now there should be 3 of those, and they support the tank balancing pipes, which are made out of 1mm brass rod. There should be 3 on each side, but it looks like that when this was removed and folded, the 2 outer ones on either side have been cut off or snipped off. Now your 2 alternatives are: you can apply to DJH and let them know that that this has happened and get a replacement, or you can do what I'm going to do, which is fabricate my own straps. And it just so happens that I've got a couple of half-etched boiler bands left over from my standard 4, my MOK standard 4, and these are exactly the right width to actually fabricate some new straps. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this thin nickel silver material to fabricate the straps. There aren't many parts involved in this particular stage, but it is quite involved, and getting this alignment right will basically influence the quality of the build of the rest of the body. So going back to our parts, this is the lower chassis. If you notice that there are etched parts inside, so this is the sealing ring for the smoke box, and there are various detail parts on the other edge. These need to be removed and the same on the upper foot plate. There are various window frames and other fittings that need to be removed and kept safe, so make sure you do that. The other parts that are involved, I showed you the wire. There's 2 front frames which are on the chassis etch, nickel silver. They're quite nice etches, half etch detail on the outside, and you've also got on the chassis etch 2 buffer beams which are handed. The one with the small surround to the coupling hook pocket, that goes on the front. The one on the rear, if you can see, that's got a large rectangular bit round the coupling hook pocket, and that goes on the rear. So make sure you get those the right way round. The other thing that you're going to need for this part is the boiler casting. Now it doesn't actually say that in the instructions, and the reason for using the boiler casting is that there are some half cast pockets just on the inside of where the smoke box wrapper finishes, and these side frames sit in the pocket like this, so not to leave any gap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to set the width of the front frames. You will need to make sure that this T-piece bit at the bottom, which sits on the footplate, is smooth. Mine one has got a slight casting flash on it, and I'm going to remove that with a nail file shortly and make sure that it's perfectly smooth. The other thing that you may have an issue with this is there are a number of well, hold on, there's 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. There are 16 on either side of the valence, 16 half-etched indicators on the rear, but this bit already came folded. Now the purpose of that is to you either use your riveting tool or do what I do, which is drill them out and fit brass rivets in the place. There are 16 on either side. It's very difficult to actually drill them or punch them when it's folded up like this. So what I had to do was I had to use my hold and fold, had to sort of bend the valence out to 45 degrees so that I can actually get in and drill them. But I managed to do that without any damage, and I haven't folded the buffer beams up, but I'll do that a little bit later. So going through all that, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to fit the majority of the rivets on the outside of the footplate valence. I'm not going to fit the 6 on either side where the supports for the balancing pipe is. I'm going to leave that for a moment, but I'm going to go away and I'm going to go and fit those rivets first, having removed the other parts from inside the 2 footplate edges, and I'll show you what I've done when I've completed that stage. So here we go, we've gone away, and what we've done, we have bent up the 2 pieces on the top of the pre-folded footplate. These locate the cab fittings or the cab interior when we get to that stage. I've also folded down the buffer beams at either end. They should fit nicely inside the valence. And I've also put a fillet of solder down the sides across the bottom at both ends, and this will give it added strength. Any holes that may appear in the where the buffer beam meets the valence, they can be filled in when we add the buffer beams, because the buffer beams add a base behind. So if there are any gaps that you can't fill in, wait until you've fitted the buffer beams and then redo the fillets. So that should be no particular problem. I've also fitted the 10 pairs of 0.5mm rivets and left off the middle ones, as I said I would. Fitted those, used the minimum amount of solder, and remember to flux both on top and underneath so that the solder goes through whichever side you prefer. I've found it easier to do it from the top, because that way the rivets don't fall out, but if you don't use the minimum amount of solder, you'll end up with a bit more cleaning up to do. And again, for cleaning up, I use a stainless steel brush in a Dremel set at about 7,500 RPM. Because the rivets are harder than the solder, the stainless steel removes the solder quite nicely, so you end up with quite a nice surface where the rivets go. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to prepare the top part of the footplate, and on this there are 6 8BA, I think they're 8BA. I would just refer to to the hardware list at the front. Oh no, they're M2, so there are 6 M2 nuts which you need to fit in the half-edge pockets that are on top. These secure the chassis to the body. They also secure the cab interior from the underneath, as I said later on. But the purpose here is that I'm going to use them to hold the two parts of the footplate together so that they're aligned. So I'll go away and fit these nuts and fit these two parts together, and then we'll take it from there. So I'll go away and do that, and then I'll come back and show you what I've done. So as I said, I've gone away, and what I've done is I've taken the top foot plate and I've added the 6 M2 nuts. When you make a DJH kit, although it doesn't really mention in the instructions, it's always worth investing in a number of taps, and I would recommend at the minimum that you need an M2, a 10BA and a 12BA tap. That's because on some of the larger kits you need to tap certain items to fit them. Certainly up on top up there I've got a standard 5 kit to build, and you definitely need at least a 12BA tap for that, because some parts you need to tap to fit to hold them in place. But for a relatively simple kit like this, it's always worth having an M2 kit, because DJH tend to use M2 rather than 8 or 6BA bolts to fit parts together, especially the chassis and the body. So I've used my M2 tap to clean the nuts out of any solder that has managed to wick through as I've fitted them. And then what I've done is I've used there's 6 M2 bolts in the kit, and I've used those to hold the two parts of the chassis together. So as you can see, you've got the top footplate bit and the bottom bit with the valence and everything on. Make sure that you don't lose any of the M2 bolts, because there aren't any spares in the kit. There are only 6. So when this is all fitted together, I'm going to take them away and I'll put them in a Ziploc bag that I've kept from other kits. I tend to keep quite a few of those around to hold small stuff which is easy to lose. So this isn't soldered together yet, and what we need to do now is we need to add the front framing, the cover the cylinders. So there are 2 slots at one end. The end which has got the 3 bolts in, that's the bunker end. So there are 2 slots in the front, and then these pieces go through the slots like so, and then there are tabs underneath which you fold over and solder. So what we'll do is we'll fit both of these first. If I can find the other one, there's the other one. So you fit both of them, and obviously they're not sitting upright yet because they've not been secured, but as I mentioned, you've got the boiler, and what you need to do is you need to position the boiler in roughly the place where it's going to go. Just hold it in place, and then fit the 2 front framing parts so that they fit into the recesses, as I mentioned. I need to go away because I haven't removed the casting pip off this yet. I'll go away and do that, then I'll fit these, and then I'll show you what I've done. Right, so what we have now is the basic running plate for constructing the body. What I've done is I've soldered it all round the inside and cleaned it up. if you can see, there are two large holes on the bunker end of the running plate, and these are to assist you to solder, to get the solder in to make a good joint. I've removed the screws. I haven't put them in a packet yet, but I will do shortly. I've soldered the two flaps on either bit of the front framing. When you fit the front frames, continually check that they are vertical, and I've tried it with the boiler, and the boiler fits on top of them quite nicely. There's a little bit of adjustment to do, but nothing too major that can't be sorted out later. Just make sure that these are vertical. I found that the slots in the two flat pieces are quite wide, and you need to push them in as far as they go, so they need to be up to the inside edge of the slot. The downside to that, of course, it means that it leaves quite a large portion of the slot visible on the outside, but that's easily filled up with a fillet of solder, because you've got the flap underneath. The flaps go out, so the flaps are this side, and they form a reasonably decent base for you to fill in with solder. So what I'm going to do next, the only things that I've got to do next are the front and rear buffer beam. I'll do those, and I will do the balancing pipes, which, if you mentioned, I'm going to use some leftover nickel silver boiler band from an MOK standard 4 to do the strapping. So I'll complete that, and then I'll show you what I've done, and then page 6 of the instructions for this kit will be complete. So I'll go away and do that now, and then I'll show you what I've done. So here we are, we have almost completed this stage. So what I've done, I've soldered the nickel silver buffer beams the correct way round. If you remember, the one on the rear has got a rectangle, quite a large rectangle around the coupling pocket. I've soldered them. Make sure they're fully seated that way and also that way, so they're sitting on the dummy buffer beam in the lower bit. I used my tapered reamer to make sure that the buffer holes were in alignment. So I've done that both ends, and I've also done one of the tank balancing pipes, which you can probably just about see there. Looking at the pictures in the book, they sit on or just off the valance at the bottom. Depending on how long your locomotive has been between shops and everything, they did look quite battered at times. They were very vulnerable, so don't particularly worry if they're distorted when you do them. But how I did it, if I can find the pieces, 1mm wire, make sure it's 1mm. I cut my lengths to 110mm long. On reflection, maybe that is a little bit too short, so, but the pieces you get are quite big. They're about 150mm, so they're ample. Don't make them too long, because otherwise they'll interfere with the sandboxes on the chassis. So, as I said, I made mine 110mm. You could probably get away with 120 if you wanted. I've annealed with a gas burner at either end about 1 centimetre from the end. Then I've bent the ends round a 6.5mm drill to get the bend. The stanchions that hold the pipes, if you measure between the first and the third, they're 85. It's 85 millimeters. So you need to make sure that there is at least, I would say, 105 millimeters between the bends where they disappear up into the chassis. They did extend slightly either side, and again, with most locomotives there is no real consistency. Some of them look identical, some of them don't, some of them stretch a bit further, some of them don't stretch so much further, some disappear off in all directions and everything. But like I said, those are the dimensions that I've used. So it's 85 millimeters between the first and the third stanchion. I've used 110 millimeters, and I've bent the wire about 5 millimeters beyond, 5-7 millimeters beyond the end stanchions. Then all you need to do is add, if you've managed to get a lower bit of chassis which has still got the three tabs on, you place the wire on top of the tabs and then bend the tab over and then trim it off. Like I said, the pipe looks as though it almost sits on the valence, or slightly below it, not by very far. It doesn't hang off it by miles. Or if you do what I've done, which is I've cut 3 pieces of leftover boiler band from MOK standard 4, and all you need to do with that is thin enough, just wrap it round the wire, bend it so that the 1mm wire is slightly forward. You don't want them to join immediately below, they need to be slightly behind. Bend them, pinch them together like they were you know, those brass, I can't remember what they're called now, but I'll remember in a minute what they are. But yeah, pinch it together like those clips, and then solder it from the rear. And then what I did, I lined them up with the holes where I hadn't fitted the 0.5mm rivets, lined the supports up with those, soldered them from the rear, and then drilled through the front. And then I've added the 6 rivets, which you probably can't see because they're pretty small, but you can guarantee they are there. So what I'm going to do is, this bit is now finished, barring the other side, which I haven't done yet, which is just a repeat of this side. I'm going to go away and do that now, but I won't come back because it's just a repeat of this side. So thank you for watching. This is the end of page 6 of the A8 build, and when we come back the next time, we will start putting the superstructure on the footplate. One other thing that I need to stress to you is please make sure that you try and keep this as level and distortion free as possible. There is a certain amount of give in it which you can see, so you can eliminate any problems, but the key to having a good body without huge amounts of holes is to keep this bit flat. So thank you for watching, and see you the next time.